All right. Bonjour, bonjour. Welcome, everyone, to this conversation. Welcome to the 12th Montreal Comic Arts Festival on this Sunday, last day of the festival. Bienvenue à tous. This year's panels are presented by La Presse. And the next panel you're about to hear about is Creation and Misery, a subject that I'm very, very eager to hear about as well. And the host of this conversation is artist and comic book specialist Kim Hoang. Welcome.
Hello, welcome. So I've been presented, so I'm going to present these lovely guests beside me and those lovely authors. So here I have Julie Delporte, who was born in Saint-Malo, France, in 1983. She presently resides in Montreal, Canada. And this woman's work is her third graphic novel after Journal and Everywhere Antennas. She holds a degree in cinema studies and was a fellow at the Center for Cartoon Studies in White River Junction, Vermont. When she's not working on comics, she makes ceramics, writes poetry and essays, and works on risograph and silkscreen projects. She loves animals, plants, and sometimes humans. And then we have Arizona O'Neill, who is a Montreal-based illustrator and author. She has created original videos for CBC's Creator Network and artists such as 𝘊𝘵𝘄𝘗𝘓 and Patrick Watson. Her monthly painted illustrations fill the window of Drawn-In Quarterly Bookstore in the Mile End. Her book of illustrated graphic interviews with celebrated and controversial Quebec artists is called 𝘊𝘰𝘳𝘶𝘵. So we're going to talk about that. It was just released in November 2022. And then last but not least, we have Nick Drnaso, who was born in 1989 in Palos Hills, Illinois. His debut, Beverly, received the Los Angeles Times Book Prize for Best Graphic Novel. His follow-up, the graphic novel Sabrina, was a New York Times Notable Book of 2018 and received nominations for the Booker Prize, the Eisner Award, the 𝘊𝘵𝘵 and 𝘊𝘰𝘳𝘃 Harold Clark Fiction Prize, the Orwell Prize for Political Fiction, and the New York Public Library's Young Lions Award. Sabrina has been published in 15 countries. Drnaso lives in Chicago with his wife and their 2 cats. And his new book is Acting Class. Okay. So yes, this is a conversation about creation and misery. There is going to be plenty of time for audience Q&A in the end. So feel free to save your questions. Up top, I would like to know how many of you are aspiring / already creative or comics like artists or other kinds of artists, and which is why you're here at this thing. Raise a hand, please. Okay, that's good to know. All right. Okay, it's not too bad. All right, we can just talk about your misery. We don't have to be too instructive. Okay. So yeah, we'll start off this conversation. I'm gonna see. So basically, when I was proposed this topic, the way I saw it was that there's kind of 2 big categories to talk about today. So one would be kind of sort of representing or depicting sort of like misery, like not wonderful times, and then the other thing is like as an artist, as a creator, being a human and therefore experiencing like general human misery as well as specific, unique to creators' misery. So, and then there's the Venn diagram of that, which is kind of representing misery while also feeling miserable. So this is what we're going to find out from our artists today. So can you briefly tell us maybe about the books in front of you that sort of have been assigned to be like your misery books? One by one? Yeah. It's gonna be super uplifting, y'all. It's like, it's fine. It's not gonna be like a super depressing topic. It's like we're all gonna feel so good after this, like we all like had therapy. It's fine. So, Julie, can you tell us about this woman's work or portrait of a woman or a lady or woman? No. Okay. Anyway.
Portrait of a body.
Bodies.
We just find the title in English because it's not released
yet.
Yeah,
it's not the same. Yeah.
To come in English next year, but it exists in French as Corps Vivante.
Yes.
But so which one do you want me to talk about?
This one, because it's in front of us.
Okay, so the last one in English, this woman's work. So it's very autobiographical, and it took me a long time to do it. At the beginning, it was supposed to be a book on Tove Jansson, which is the author of the Moomin series. So I wanted to do a documentary about it. And then I was like, oh, maybe this is going to be a fiction about someone going to Finland to study the Moomin who would really exist in my book. And finally, I was working. I was still I was an artist, but still having a day job at DQ bookstore, actually. And it took me so much time, and it changed, and it became a book about me and the way I identified with Tove Jansson and why I loved her so much. And actually, it was because it was the first woman that I could identify with, really. I mean, maybe not the only one, but that was something
really
that I realized for the first time. So I made a book about that and why this happened so late in my life.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
So my book, 𝘊𝘰𝘳𝘶𝘃, which translates to Can an Artist Be Happy? I think my book is actually uplifting. I don't think it's with this
It's
conversation about misery.
Yeah, you talk about misery in order to get to where you're happy, right?
Yes.
Like it's like the unspoken thing, right?
Yes. Well, I think when I started it, I thought the answer was going to be a resounding no, and then I realized that I probably was just surrounding myself with a lot of depressed artists because when I went out into the world to talk to artists. So the book itself is 12 interviews with Quebec artists about their careers, but also how they integrate happiness into their careers and what makes them happy. And I think and I learned a lot about happiness while writing it, and what I realized where I draw my joy from. So that was a big part of the book. I think it was therapeutic for me to write it. I also wrote it while working part-time at 𝘊𝘵𝘬𝘗𝘓𝘃 Quarterly. So, that's its own misery in itself, working a part-time job while illustrating full-time. Overall a joyous process.
This newest book, I guess to me falls more under loneliness and isolation, which I guess is a distinct kind of misery. But I guess misery as a concept is something that comes up again and again and is somewhat unavoidable in everything I do. But now that I'm thinking about the word misery, it's like there's a hopelessness to that word. I think I describe my books more as melancholic, which is just like integrating misery into your life and just making it work somehow. So even when I'm not trying to, they come out, melancholic or miserable or whatever word you choose.
Well, we'll use all of the synonyms of misery today, so that we're not no one's just counting our misery count by the end of the thing. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have really 3 quite sort of different books in front of us here. One, like you said, is very autobiographical. One is kind of autobiographical, but of other. Not just biographical, I guess is the word. And then one that's just a pure work of fiction, more or less, but have these sort of elements of misery, elements of sort of sadness and negative feelings, depicting negative feelings rather than a full happy sort of thing. So I think up top, I think we should all also address sort of this myth of the tortured artist. Do you feel like it's a myth, or do you feel like there is some truth to it? Do you feel like do you see yourself as kind of a tortured artist in times, or do you feel and how it informs your work, or you have to have some sort of emotional something in order to work, or is it kind of the opposite even? Well, yeah. What's your take on the tortured artist trope? And yeah, feel free to interject.
I can tackle it. I think for me, I definitely do think it's a myth because a lot of artists, when I talk to them, say that they need to be in a good place emotionally to be able to create. And I agree with that. On days where I'm not feeling, particularly proud of myself, I can't get off the couch. I'm not drawing, but maybe some people thrive in it. But I've yet to really meet anyone who does thrive in misery. But maybe, I don't know. Do you?
Actually, it's funny because my first book, Journal, I was able to start it and really do it when it was my first big breakup. So I felt very, very miserable, and I started, which became my first long book. And then this woman's work, as I said, it took years, but I was able to really start it and see it and say, okay, no, I'm serious, when I had another breakup. And I don't know if you're familiar with that movie, it's the Little Woman from the 90s with Winona Ryder. There is a scene which she is like devastated and she takes the whole night writing her novel. And I went to see the version of what's her name, Greta
Gerwig.
Yeah, with my girlfriend. She said, "This is like completely cliche," and I was, yeah, but I can identify with it. But so I was very afraid not to be able to do portrait of a body because I had like a relationship who was working. But finally I did it. So yeah.
So it wasn't the comics after all. That wasn't the thing that was like ending the relationships. You're okay.
Did drawing the book after the breakup make you feel better while you were doing it?
Yes. For me, it's very therapeutic. I feel really miserable, but when I start to write and draw, this goes away. I'm focusing.
It gives you a work to do instead of being like just miserably sitting there or whatever.
Yeah.
What about you, Nick? Do you feel are you a tortured artist?
I guess that's kind of like a self-pitying younger person's thing. And
Absolutely.
then, like, past a certain point, you're just annoying, and people move away from you, so you have to, I don't know.
Get your crap together, kind of.
Yeah. So, I guess, maybe there was a bit of that in my first two books, and then I thought I had progressed into something that would be read in a different way with this new book, and then people tell then you get the response and realize that the theme, you can't escape it or can't get away from it. So,
yeah. Actually, I was about to. The follow-up question to that was like, did things change over time for you? Like, is it an age thing? Is it like something you kind of start with and grow out, and therefore is it kind of like a universal? You're just a tortured young person, not necessarily a tortured artist, but you have to get through that or something. Yeah, has it changed, like, your thoughts about it kind of changed through time, or even, like, with Arizona, with having interviewed all these people, your thoughts have changed maybe about this trope of the tortured artist?
I guess because I grew up around artists, and my mother's an artist, they always seemed to be miserable. But it was because they were miserable about success, and this concern about it. And so I think that when there was no option for me. Like, I was going to be an artist, even though when I was younger, I thought I was going to be like a dermatologist, which was very bizarre. But when I was growing up, I didn't even realize there was another option for a career. Like, I just thought that people just stayed at home and wrote in bed, So when I became an artist, I really wanted to not fall into the tropes that I had seen my mother fall into. So I tried to draw happiness from my work. Yeah, that makes sense. So I started off being happy.
And you've been happy.
Yeah, for me, it's really going better with the time. Yeah. And also one of the torturing things for me is like having the sensation I couldn't draw because I come from more writing background, and drawing was really hard for me. Like I was expecting of myself a lot and not able to. I felt really limited for a long time, and I still feel limited, but it's really better now. I can take my pencil and be happy in the first drawing, so it's really more fun.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you think Nick? Do you think you changed between like your very first book and this book now? Like, has I guess your sentiment of creating changed at all, or is it kind of still you're also kind of happy all along?
No, I mean the process. Like, I guess the chicken or the egg thing is like I'm not depressed because I draw comics. I draw comics because I'm depressed. You know.
What is the?
Because it must be cathartic in some way, even if it's frustrating at times.
Yeah.
Or unsatisfying. But no, I can definitely feel a difference day to day between making comics 10 years ago and making comics now. So that's reason to be a little hopeful or feel good about that as a path.
Mm-hmm. And then also what Julie was saying, so if we're not talking about happiness, there is like a lot of self-doubt involved. Because I also had feelings of, can I draw? Which is ridiculous. But, you know, to have that about yourself, I don't know. I always thought it wasn't going to be the path for me to draw. So, you know, self-doubt is, I guess, a form of unhappiness. But that's present, yeah.
But here you all are. Yeah. So, Julie, you were saying in this woman's work, obviously 𝘊𝘵𝘗 Johnson is a big figure for you. It was meant, you know, she lived a really enigmatic life, and as you say in the book, there's like you related to her, and you wrote about that, and how much she kind of changed your mind a little bit, or changed your perspective about things while you were kind of miserable. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the effect of having a figure kind of like a role model, you know, not even like, you know, present in your life, kind of like a figure in your life, like of inspiration of 𝘊𝘵 Johnson and the Moomins, and how...
Yeah, it's a very complex question, and it goes all through the books. But one thing I remember who was really a relief for me is to read about her becoming older as an artist with another artist. They were living on a separate house, separate apartment, but in the same buildings, and so they would visit when they want, but still have their own space. And they had like a house on an island in a very remote place. And they were like, when you read the novels of 𝘊𝘵 Johnson, and she talks about their life a lot, and you see how much they were working at age of 60, then 70, then 80, and talking about friendship with other people and love. And I was like maybe 30 or 35 years old when I was drawing the book, and I know I shouldn't have feel like that, but I was in a heteronormative life, and at the time I felt like I would soon, how do you say, périmer, like, you know, expire as a woman. When you go up to 45, and you see, like, I'm going to generalize a lot, but you see men of your age starting to date 10 years younger women, and you don't have any women
kind of
to project.
You lose your value a little bit.
I mean, like, you want to identify with cool women, but where are they? And there was 𝘊𝘵 Johnson. Oh my God, yes.
And she was older, like, and you had her whole life to model yourself and remind yourself that there was somebody out there.
Yeah, and it's still beautiful and working and interesting at the age of 80 years old. That's just nice for me.
Do you think you learned, like, how... Did you learn a lesson of, like, pulling yourself out of misery from her? Like, do you think she had a thing from that you kind of also did?
I don't know.
Okay.
If it's on
Just her existing was enough.
I think basically that's feminism who
Yeah.
brought me out of my misery.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great.
But she was part of my...
Yeah, the embodiment of that. Yeah. Arizona and Nick, do you have like similar, like do you have a Tova Johnson, like a little lighthouse of a person, whether that's somebody who's in your life or someone who just inspires you?
It's going to be obvious, but it's my mother. So, she really pulled us out of despair when I was young. And just the other night, we were talking about my childhood, and then she was like, "Oh no, did you have a bad childhood?" She had like never crossed her mind before, and I was like, "No, it's fine, it's fine." So it's her, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have it through family members per se, so when I got to college age, it was the mentor, kind of older generation of cartoonists. And
anyone in particular? Or?
Well, one of my best friends is 𝘊𝘵𝘐𝘵𝘠𝘕. He's a cartoonist in Chicago. He was my teacher, and as far as a model, he has his own struggles with debilitating clinical depression, but just seeing that there's a model to try to make it work and still somehow produce things was hopeful when adulthood seems very confusing and scary.
Yeah, he was kind of successful, not even despite, but while having crippling depression, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if he was on the stage right now, he'd say it's totally set him back from, where his talent is and where his skill is, so I don't want to romanticize it and make it seem like... It probably is the thing that makes his art, the tension that makes it interesting and makes him really harshly scrutinize himself, but then it also makes it completely unable to work most of the time.
Yeah.
So that's the catch-22.
Yeah, definitely. Not easy. Yeah. So Nick and Julie. Wait, do I step forward? Yeah. And Nick and Julie, I noticed that. So when you draw your characters in your comic, when you depict different characters, I noticed that neither of you kind of they're emotional works, but you don't draw the faces or the expressions to be like very emotional. Like there's not a lot. They're kind of emotional, almost in omission. Sometimes it's like the lack of kind of reaction in a character when something terrible happens to them. Lots of terrible things happen in acting class. So, but sometimes they react kind of in a muted almost way because they're maybe already kind of in a miserable state or whatever. And then for Julie, sometimes in the sort of, when you're talking about sort of some of the traumatic things that have happened to you, almost kind of erase the faces, like they're not even sort of there. I wanted to just ask if this was like kind of a deliberate choice, like if this was a choice that you made artistically because for whatever reason you might have made that, or and how it serves you, if you were even noticing that you were doing that or whatever, like.
I noticed it.
It's on purpose. Yeah.
Also, I feel imitated, but it's more like there is this thing in comics where you learn to draw the expression, and I never learned that kind of drawing techniques, and I don't want to draw them because I don't want my drawings to look like that. I don't know why.
It's not part of your style. That's fine.
Yeah, and also I think I did a lot of diaries. This woman work, it's diary-like, and it feels more real to me to just draw the thing that I see or to draw from pictures that I like, and not drawing myself. Actually, that's a different approach, I guess. And I especially for the next book, Portrait of a Body, I think that I wanted the readers to feel like they are a bit in my head. So a lot of things that are drawn are things that I'm seeing or imagining, and I'm not looking at myself. So that's it. Actually, there is other people. That's true, but there is still a kind of emotional thing about softness. Yeah, but yeah. Well, I don't know if it's an interesting answer, but.
Yeah, I mean, it was a stylistic choice, I guess, in the beginning, and also just a circumstantial thing, feeling like I had limited time in the day, balancing it with a day job. So it was kind of like a philosophy, but also just an acknowledgement of my own limitations, I guess. So that's how I arrived at this kind of sparse style. But then I think also when I have tackled darker material, especially with my second book, Sabrina, when I was editing, every time I went back, I tended to, if it was a close-up where I was trying to capture somebody's anguished expression, I would end up redrawing it to completely zoom out and just show them in a lonely room where their face is maybe just completely obscured. And I think it just worked better on a functional level, but also it was almost like an acknowledgement that the stuff I was depicting wasn't from my own life experience, so it was like I can't pretend to know what certain experiences are like, like a death of somebody or, some kind of tragedy like that. So those were kind of the decisions that I was making as far as like figuring out how much of the face to depict.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's like unportrayable, right? Like even if, yeah. So yeah, in Arizona, obviously, you don't get really their interviews. So thankfully, nobody showed any faces of anguish in the middle of being interviewed.
Yeah, they weren't crying or anything. Well, I mean, I wish some of the interviews maybe had gone that deep,
but it's good. They were talking about happiness.
Yeah, but also a lot of the interviews were done on Zoom.
Yeah.
And so, it's very or on the phone.
Okay.
So it was a lot of me projecting on what someone would look like while they were saying this.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that because I don't know. I guess I don't know why.
No,
I
would always ask them at the end, like, is there a place in Montreal that you want to be drawn in? Because it's also a love letter to the city.
Yeah.
So and then sometimes I would guide them a little bit, like, don't you want to be drawn here? Because I wanted to draw that place. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really because I was gonna ask like the art question sort of I had for you was basically like your artistic decisions. I think that's pretty cool because pretty much we're just working with
it's all in my brain,
right?
Yeah, exactly. And I would ask everyone I interviewed, I would ask them to then email me about 20 photos of themselves, acting as if they were talking to somebody, and so I would send like a PDF of like photos of myself doing and I would work off of those references and let the interview guide creatively.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't even have to ask the rest of my question. Yeah. So Arizona and Julie. So obviously sexism and sort of gender rigidity and what the sort of expectations of women specifically, especially, seems to be kind of like feature heavily as like sources of misery, like whether it was in your book with your own life or with as the sort of dark side of the interviewees sort of like happiness, obviously. As a person, like as a woman now who kind of experiences these sort of forces upon their life, was it like how do you approach like these like difficult subjects, right? Like do you find like your own sort of sadness and frustration and anger is helpful in your art, or do you find it actually like is it a fuel, or do you actually need to like be able to step back from it in order to really write about it kind of honestly or just have the energy to write about it at all?
I think sexism fuels me, so I just like embody the hatred and put it right back out. Yeah. So I don't really let it get to me in the same way. I do think like being a woman is hard, and being taken seriously, all the stuff. We've all heard the stuff about why it's hard, and being a woman in comic, blah blah blah.
Yeah. Wow.
But I don't want to be a man, so there's not a solution to it.
The solution is a better world for everybody.
Yeah,
obviously.
I guess.
What about you, Julie?
Yeah, I think I put a bit of like the intention of making like my little things to go to a better world, as you say. So I guess it's somewhere here.
Yeah.
But yeah, a better world for women, but for everyone, basically. Yeah. I don't know how to.
Yeah. Do you? Sorry. Like, the question was sort of like, do you feel like it helps you, or do you feel like it hinders you more?
At the beginning, I think it helped me, even if I didn't know it, because I really needed recognition from my peers, from like a sort of revenge on life, and you want to be seen, and then later you realized it's not easy to be seen as a woman in arts. I mean, it was not also. It's changing. It's a lot changing. And at the beginning, but no, I don't know. I don't think it interacts so much with it anymore.
And I'm pretty good at like cutting people out of my life, so I feel like I'm just like surrounded by very positive things.
I learned to do that.
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I like to live in my bubble, which is dangerous sometimes because sometimes I go out into the real world and I'm shocked. And when the internet is a scary place and the comment section is scary, so stay away. And then working for like CBC and stuff, there's a lot of like sexism under the videos, and so I just stay away.
Yeah.
And get paid for it.
Yeah. And yeah, Nick, you obviously don't have to deal with any sort of like necessarily with a lot of marginalization, but your characters, especially in acting class, like there's a lot of women characters that definitely have like misery that comes out of their experiences as women. How did you sort of research or empathize or like try to find a way of writing these characters, like honestly?
Oh, I don't know if there's any way to do that except to, I don't know. It just seems. I mean, I feel a lot of that shame and kind of the things you absorb from your environment, or the things that you don't realize you've absorbed until you're, out of a suburb that you grew up in or something. So I don't have a good answer, and I don't feel like I even deserve any even that statement. Like that like fills me with shame and like so. Yeah, I don't have a good answer.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
More or less that brings me to the end of my questions. But I hope I'm not springing this onto you, Arizona. But you've interviewed 12 artists from Quebec, and today you have an artist from Quebec and an artist from Nat. I thought before we open it to questions that maybe you would like to ask your question to the other artists we have present here.
Here's the thing, is that nobody can answer that question, which is why it's the title. So I can finish with the question. All of my interviews, when I interviewed all 12 people, I always ended each interview with asking them the little things in life that brought them joy. And then that kind of illustrates at the end. Like the cover is 𝘊𝘵𝘳𝘵𝘠 gag saying that simply that oysters bring her joy. And so I find that happiness is found in the little things. And when we let go of happiness and don't worry about it as a concept, we are satisfied. So what, Julie, are the little things in life that bring you joy?
Dogs. But
for the recording, there's a very cute 3-month-old puppy right on the front row that we both petted very excitedly at the beginning of this panel.
But I actually wanted to answer just a bit about...
Yeah, go for it. She's going to tackle it.
Est-ce qu'un artiste peut être heureux?
We believe in you. Go for it.
Can an artist be happy?
Yes.
It's not easy every day, but I think I'm still happier as an artist than working in a awful job like everyone has to do, like everyone else. I mean, there is great jobs also, but you know the.
Don't you find though that you have to really always draw back from your trauma from past to put on the page that maybe they don't have to do it an office job?
I would be miserable in an office.
I've tried.
In a
I've tried
bookstore,
working a
it
9
was
to 5
fine,
job.
but in an office, I'm just like having all my empathy for people.
Yeah.
And what about you? Do you want to answer? You can answer both. Little things that bring you joy, and also can an artist be happy?
The joy for mine is cats. So sorry, Julie.
Yeah, next year or whatever you invite back Nick Drnaso, please put him on the Cats and
Yeah, I
Comics
wanted to be on the
panel.
Cats
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But no, that's the most obvious answer besides my relationship and my friendships and just absorbing other art that keeps me going. But day to day in the studio, it's my relationship with my cats. And then I'm sorry, the title is Can an Artist Be Happy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know fairly happy artists, actually.
Yeah,
Great.
exactly. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, right. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
The answer, I think we all know, is 𝘰𝘬𝘗𝘓, right? Can an artist be happy? 𝘰𝘬𝘗𝘓.
That wraps up everything.
Yeah.
She was frustrated a lot. Like
Yeah.
she hated
was
the
she
Moomin
happy?
at the end. Or at some times. She hated the strips she had to do for the English newspaper.
Yeah.
But not all Moomins.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just like happiness as a word is just toxic. So
Yeah.
it's like let it go.
Yeah. Awesome.
Are we doing questions?
All right. Let's see how much time we have left. We have a little over 20 minutes for questions from the audience. So now that you're all primed, please, there is a microphone here. Please speak into the microphone and we can hear your questions. You are being recorded. It's not a big deal. Are there any takers? No hands, but feel free to step up to the mic. If not, I'm going to start asking.
Is the mic too intimidating?
Yeah.
Just yell it out. Yeah, just raise your hand.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a microphone right here, so you can come speak to the microphone if you'd like. You can? Can you make it?
Yeah, it's too trapped.
Okay. Yell the question. I will say the mic as I heard it into my mic.
Okay, so when you're working on a project and you're committed and you have a deadline and you have to deliver, and things are going well and you've got your routine, you're showing up for work every day, and then something terrible happens in your life, like something hard, emotional, something that derails you emotionally. How and do you stick to the deadline, or do you have ways that do you have rituals or routines, or do you have things you do for yourself, or do you say no, fuck it? I mean, do you just say no, I'm going for a walk, or you talk to your publisher and say, you know what, I do need 2 weeks. How do you deal with real life living and producing as a creator? Because I know for me personally, I can struggle with that sometimes, but I also think, hey, it's an excuse. I need to just work anyway. But sometimes, I don't know, I think that our world is kind of messed up how we think about profit first, and we should be thinking about our health first. But yeah, how do you guys deal with that?
Okay, so yeah. Yeah, the question is as a professional, now that you've made it this far as an artist, what are, as a working artist on a regular basis, if something were to interrupt your life, a traumatic event or something unexpected were to happen, how do you deal with that? What are your rituals? Who do you have to talk to in terms of, your publisher, or how to move your deadlines around, or deal with sort of life as it happens to you during your kind of professional, when your professional trajectory is interrupted?
Yeah. Yeah, I try to arrange myself to have deadlines who are really far away. So I know these things would happen and I'll still have time to recover. So that's basically how I try to work. And also, my French publisher is very... I'm asking him deadlines and he never wants to give me any one. When you're ready. So I feel less pressure. But there is the illustration job sometimes that need to be finished. It's more like but it's okay. I'm very anxious, so I always put the sometimes I'm like I'm taking a job and I'm like, oh my god, this is going to take me like 2 weeks, and then in 2 days it's done, and I'm like, oh really, I can do that. So I'm more that, I think.
You kind of learned how long you normally need to take to do something, and just give yourself like a wide.
Yeah, I'm this person who is not more en avance à un rendezvous than late. Mm-hmm. So that's how it works for me.
Unfortunately, all my deadlines are always tight. They're always like, get it to us in 3 months. I'm like, okay. And I'm the queen of big events happening and derailing everything. But how I deal with it is the only thing that makes me feel better is working. But the problem is it's not for every art form. So for me, when I draw, I have an audiobook always running at like 1.4 speed. And so my brain is literally on an autopilot. Like, it's listening to the book and it's also drawing. So when I get into that state, nothing can get to me anymore. And then I always try to do that from 9 to 5. And then 5 p.m. comes. My energy goes with the sun. So once the sun sets in winter at 4, then I become depressed. And so then I grieve. And then the sun comes back up and I'm like rejuvenated. So I just picture it like that.
Yeah. Once again, I think it's like you kind of know yourself, and so you
it's
work
different
around
for everyone.
it.
But
Yeah,
I try
just whatever it
I
is
bury
that
myself
works for you
in my work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, the same thing, kind of ritual and routine is a great comfort and keeps me relatively productive. But I also don't work well under pressure, so I deliberately set the deadlines way off and don't.
Same as Julie.
Yeah, and when I knew I wanted to make long-form graphic novels, I deliberately kept all freelance projects at bay. I just worked day jobs, janitor jobs, to make it feel like it wasn't connected at all to what I was doing at night. The pressure is definitely. That's like a creativity killer for me. Some people get the motivation, and it just crushes me when I have some kind of pressure on.
I also have a lot of people in my life who hold me accountable to my deadlines. Like, I overshare with my friends and family. So at the end of the day, they're always like, did you do it? Did you do the thing that you needed to do? So I'm always like, I need to get this done to impress like Beatrice, who's going to call me at the end of the day. You know?
But which is hard, I feel like with drawing, is that some days it comes so easily, and some other days it takes like I don't know, you can do anything, and I'm not aware of why. So.
And sometimes it's just bad. Like, what happened today with it?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, and yeah, like do you have other sort of like? I don't want to use the word self-care because it's not really what I mean, but that's the first word that sort of comes to mind. Like something sort of outside of, maybe this is the same question that you ask your artists here, where it's like something outside of, comics creation that sort of keeps you going, or keeps your kind of your health or your mental health kind of.
I mean, it's exactly what Nick said, like that routine. I always go for a walk at 5 p.m. because I work from home. And so some days, if I don't leave, it gets bad. Yeah. So just sticking to my schedule, eating at the same time, taking my lunch at the same time. And some people don't work like that at all. People close to me, some work only at night, but that's fine. Mm-hmm. Just have your schedule.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Can you make it there, or do you? Okay, you don't. Okay, no problem. There's 2 people. whoever wants to go first can go first. It is not competitive here, clearly. Okay. Okay.
So Nick, I'm mostly familiar with your work, so it's mostly a question for you, but I'm sure people can weigh in about it. So when you're like in the process of writing and storytelling, doing storytelling around like cruelty and despair, what's your like process around developing like fortitude around getting into those stories and getting into those perspectives? I find your work like very beautiful, but also very hard to read sometimes. Like, I feel like cleaning the toilet. Okay. See you tomorrow.
Okay, so for the question for the recording is basically when Nick is writing about really terrible things. I don't know. Sorry, what was your words again?
It was like
Right.
having fortitude.
Having,
when
yeah. How do you develop
dealing
your
with-
fortitude around writing work that is like brutal or like kind of soul crushing a little bit, despite, you know, and finding the sort of beauty in that and having, yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird tension because I'll settle on a certain subject, like the book Sabrina. That subject was just horribly depressing most of the time, having to read and dig in. It's about sort of the world of conspiracy theories online and things like that. And I crashed. I mean, when I finished it, I had like a major depression and didn't even want to publish the book. So you pay a price for it if you're dealing with it really deeply. But then even with this new book that I'm starting, there's a certain aspect of it that it kind of makes me nauseous when I think about it, like that there's going to be an element of the story that I don't even want to get into. And when I read about it, it like puts you in a bad headspace. But there's some compulsion, I guess is just the most appropriate word, to keep wanting to go back to some subject or explore something that maybe makes you a little sick to your stomach, but there's something that's just intriguing about it, I guess.
So it's maybe a little less of actual fortitude than actually just you're compulsive, or like you're kind of, you want to get to the bottom of it, like you're there's an instinct to get to the bottom of it despite, so it's not that you have like better walls than anybody else or anything.
Yeah. And hopefully over years I've learned to balance it, to step away or do something else or put my head in a different space and not be consumed with something so negative.
Pet your cats
Yeah.
a bunch. Yeah. Thank you. And the question in the back, and then you afterwards. She's coming to the mic. Yay. Or they're coming to the mic. Yay.
So I know my question is kind
Is it off?
Oh wait,
It's
is
off
the
after
mic
all
off
that.
again? This happened. There might be a little button on the mic. Perfect.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay, it works. So it's kind of a question and non-question maybe. But I thought about like when you talk about misery for an artist and like the condition, we maybe, I think, do not often think about like what are the conditions for someone misery to come. And as an artist, like we live in a society and like misery for artists before, like when we think about tortured artists, often like Van Gogh or like all those people who created so many things and had like, we think like, oh, their life were so hard. But today in our society, you know, we live in a capitalist society. We have social media, and like in sort of way, like I think like artists have now so many tools, which is amazing. But also with social media and the sense of like, I have to be productive, so I have value.
Yeah.
And maybe
Amazing.
not only
late
artists.
capitalism.
Yeah, I know it's kind of very politic what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Fine. You're in the right place.
Yeah. So, non-artists are also, I think, like have this sort of issue with like my productivity is also my value, kind of like. But as artists with social media, the pressure, like to put work forward on social medias and all. How do you? Maybe if you're not like you put distance with social media, like. Sorry, I forgot your name, but you said like
Arizona.
you really Arizona. Sorry, take time to be in your bubble and then go back into the internet. Like, oh wow, So, yeah, like my question would be like to try to escape this misery that we can have put on us, on our shoulder as artists. How do you process that with social media, with the theme of like productivity as value as artists right now, like with the two are so interlinked, I think. So yeah, that's my question. Very long, sorry.
I want to address the tortured artist of the past, because they were all men and it was women that suffered from that view, right? There was the alcoholics, the womanizing, beating of women. So I think that now that I'm glad that that tortured artist is out, and I think it also left with the Me Too movement to stop men artists acting like assholes and using the tortured artist as their way of going
like,
forward.
I need to do this because
I need
my
to do
genius
this because
or
my
whatever.
genius. And now if you're if you act that way, then maybe it could affect your career in a way that it never did before, which I'm not necessarily saying that that's the positive, but that's what I have to say about that. The social media. But yeah.
Yeah. How do you keep the waves of overwhelming things like social media and late capitalism at bay when you're doing your work?
Yeah, I read a bit of philosophy about that. There is some 𝘊𝘵𝘂𝘶𝘶 books. What did you say, Francine? Okay. There is several ones, but it's how the society changed. Well, I'm bad with my English right now, but
Dis-le
like
en français, ça va.
mais même en français, j'y arrive pas. Comme le bourreau, how do you say that? Like les patrons bourreaux, le pouvoir d'employer quelqu'un et de l'exploiter. Exploitation is no internalized in ourselves. So we are on our own bourreau. We're just like, I have to work, I have to produce.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not a solution, but reading about it and seeing like a bit of it's not hard to read actually. This guy, it's a German philosopher, and it helps just to realize you're like that, and maybe you're gonna notice it more when you are too harsh on yourself.
Yeah, you can find others in solidarity.
Yeah,
basically.
there's just more help than ever, too. You know, people are just, open about seeking help for mental health, and I think that we've just opened a huge dialogue. So I think that that's really helped. You're not on social media?
No, I mean, that's my way of sort of staying mentally healthy, I guess, is just disengaging. Because, it's hard to, like, when you realize you like making art, but then realize the end result is a commodity, like it's a product. It's like, whether it's a painting or anything, at least in our case, making books. So you have to sort of figure out how to feel okay about that and feel okay about the reaction or lack thereof when you're sitting at the table and people walk by and, I don't know. Yeah, I have trouble with that too, so I tend to just sort of stay back and not engage.
But yeah, I think for sure it's like, I'm sure even at festivals like this, when folks come by and say they read your book, they really liked it, it's sort of like a sense of communion and a sense of community. And I think when you're not alone, it's like, well, here's a good one. Misery loves company, right? So, yeah. Okay. There's one last question over there, or maybe not last. They haven't given me the time yet, so can keep going. Yes, please. Can you come to the mic, or are you stuck where you are? Okay.
I just want to know, I don't know if it's Nick Drnaso or Julie mentioned that part of the misery when you start your career is actually not having any success. How did you overcome it? What moves did you make to actually concentrate on your work and get to a place where you have success?
Okay, so the question is, in your early career, part of the miserableness of it as being an artist is that early career, you don't see the success right away. how do you move past that? How do you power through that moment where you're just like, what if I'm not good at anything?
I think that for me, the most stressful moment was putting it out there that I was an illustrator. It was like, I remember like the first time I kind of said it and I changed my like Instagram bio. I was like, oh, they're all gonna judge me, you know? So then I think it was really like I had to, once I started saying I was an illustrator and that I was working on a comic, then all of a sudden I was a comic. So it's like really, it's yourself that puts the narrative and other people aren't gonna make that narrative for you. So that's how I decided to go about it.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer, actually.
Do you still feel like you're always like still in it, where you're like, this next thing is never gonna be successful?
A bit, but not like I used to. I was more, I was believing on what I was doing. I liked it in a way, and in another way, I was feeling so frustrated because the limitation. But I wanted to prove, like I just had so much energy in me. I don't know. Yeah.
What about you, Nick?
I mean, for me, working in anonymity and isolation was kind of a great gift that I think I even realized at the time. Like, of course, I wanted to be published, and when my first book came out, that's kind of a nice feeling, but then you look back and realize you're working in a certain way that it goes away once there's the self-awareness of an audience and that self-consciousness, at least in my case. So that's the flip side of success.
Grass is greener. Okay. Can you make it to the mic, or do you want me to repeat your question? Okay, that's okay. Everybody.
Other than the self-consciousness of knowing that you're going to be read or anxiety around that, what kind of effect are you hoping to have on the reader? Like, not as a commodity, as a work of art. Are there things that you are going for in your readers?
Yeah, so the question is, outside of all that, what is the, like, how do you create, like, an effect on your readers? What is your goal there? What is the, despite, you know?
I think it's because I worked in a bookstore for 10 years. I can't turn it off. So when I'm creating, I'm constantly thinking about if it's sellable. And I don't know, like, if that's just the marketing person in me. So I'm always thinking about, will they want to pick it up? Will they want to buy it? Will they want to read it? So I'm thinking more about that than the emotional effect. But then, of course, it comes into play. Because I'm like, oh, if it's something that they'll find interesting and will touch them, then they'll want it. And now that, you know, books are so expensive, so you're like, will they spend, you know, $30 on this comic? So it's, I guess, but I don't think that's everyone.
Yeah, I mean, they take, in my case, in comics in general, take so long that you have a notion that for a scene that might be interesting, and then you draw it, and then 4 years later somebody reads it, and you don't know. Like, by that point, you're so detached from what you came up with. That's why I think I'm a little bit more detached from the reception, as opposed to, like, a comedian tells a joke, they either laugh or they don't, and you get that live reaction.
Yeah, for me, someone told me once that the feeling that they were having on my books were about consolation. Is that a word in English? Consolation? And yeah, I think it was a nice way to put it. It was
like
about
comforting.
the last one book, but I think it's all through my work. Yeah.
And a lot of times how I know if a subject is interesting is like I'll float it by people around me or just like at a party, and then people if people are really engaged with that idea, then I write it in my phone. Like, oh, that story went over very well. Let me add it to the repertoire. Maybe it will make it in, because right now I'm working on an autobiographical work, and that's kind of how it started. Was I was just talking to people I knew about it, about the story, and everyone was like, "That's a fascinating story." I was like, "Oh, okay." Put it in a book. Yeah.
All right. That's pretty much our time. So I just want to thank our artists here. I want to thank all of you as the audience. And just to let you know, all three of them will be at the Drawn and Quarterly booth at D25 for signing pretty much like 15 minutes from now. Like, we're all going to run
right
over
now.
there like a big group, I think. So yeah, we can all please tell them that their work is amazing and so that they are less miserable. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.